We're optimizing your role, chirped Melissa, her voice bright like she was announcing a brunch special, not ending my 14-year career. It was 9:02 a.m. She wore a coral print blazer that looked like a floral explosion at a Florida outlet mall, and twirled a pastel pen between her fingers like a baton of power. No eye contact, no hesitation. Just the hollow confidence of someone who'd never opened a compliance manual in her life. We were supposed to be doing a quarterly systems review. Routine, dull, necessary. The kind of meeting that keeps us from landing in orange jumpsuits when federal auditors come knocking. Instead, she blindsided me with a pink slip on letterhead I'd once helped design. The irony stung sharper than the news itself. Her gel-polished hand trembled with fake empathy. "We're restructuring toward leaner systems," she said, as if she even knew what a certificate chain was. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out the chrome access key with my initials, E. Carson, engraved neatly across its side, and placed it on her desk. Not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly, like setting down a loaded gun before walking away. She didn't even notice. As I stepped into the hallway, I thought about how ridiculous it all was, how one nephew's promotion could erase years of work. Melissa wasn't just incompetent, she was connected. Her uncle, the CEO of Norval Data Systems, thought compliance was a checkbox at the end of a PowerPoint deck. HR had ghosted me the moment I asked about severance. The board? They'd rather burn $500,000 on consultants than read a single technical brief. I'd been the key holder of record on a $400 million federal relay contract. My credentials weren't something you could replace with a quick Slack handoff. They were fingerprint mapped, verified by 3 agencies, nested through encryption layers thicker than her understanding of her own job. I drove home in silence, past the cold glass offices that used to feel like my second home. By 9:40, I was on my porch with a mug of lukewarm tea, watching the wind move through the maple trees. Somewhere deep in Norval's servers, my systems were still running on inertia, auto-renewing certificates, looping verification pings, but the heartbeat would falter soon. Without my clearance, every digital artery would eventually demand the one thing no one else had, my authentication. When that prompt appeared, it would read exactly as I'd coded it years ago. Awaiting reauthentication by keyholder of record, E. Carson. At 9:42, the first call hit Norval's ops floor. A harmless-sounding desk phone ring, one of those tones people ignore unless they're expecting panic or pizza. It was Agent Reynolds from the Federal Compliance Office, his tone polite but deadly, like a pastor at a crime scene. "We're seeing a transmission failure on the Delta node. Any idea what's going on over there?" The intern who answered panicked, then patched him through to Melissa. "Oh, that's weird," she said in that same brunch ordering tone. "Probably a handoff glitch." Reynolds paused long enough to make the air freeze. "Ma'am, per Clause 14A of your Federal Service Agreement, penalties begin accruing after 30 minutes of sustained downtime. We're at 27. She blinked, realizing for the first time that buzzwords didn't fix broken contracts. "I'll escalate this," she stammered, before sprinting to IT like a reality show contestant on her last episode. Poor Nate from Systems was mid-Pop-Tart when she burst in. She yanked his headphones off, breathless. "Reassign system credentials to me. Now!" He frowned. "Reassign what?" "My access." "Ellen's gone. I need the credentials under my name." Nate typed, hesitated. The screen flashed red. "I can't." Her voice cracked. "Why not?" "It's locked." He swallowed. "The system says, awaiting reauthentication by keyholder of record, E. Carson." She stared at the monitor like it had insulted her shoes. Nate scrolled again. "Looks like she didn't just leave. She logged a chain of custody flag. We can't touch it. You'll need full federal revetting, background checks, fingerprints, clearance. The works. Could take 72 hours. Melissa's breathing went shallow. She called legal. "Can't we override it?" "Do not." they said coldly. Attempt to override anything. You'll trigger a breach review. By 10:08, the penalties started ticking. $100,000 per hour. Reynolds called again. Current tallies begun. Should we expect the key holder to resolve this remotely? Melissa tried to steady her voice. She's no longer with the company. Reynolds sighed. Then I suggest you get her back. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed on the porch table. Unknown number, then another, then a Slack ping from legal. I didn't answer. I just sipped my tea, listening to the faint hum of chaos in the distance. The quiet felt good. By 10:25 a.m., Norval's sleek glass building had turned into a pressure cooker. The server room hummed like a disturbed beehive, and everyone with a title above associate was sprinting through hallways clutching laptops. Nate had pulled in their senior systems engineer, Carla Mercer, a woman with 20 years of scars from bad code and worse management. She squinted at the monitor, then at Melissa, then back at the monitor. Oh, hell no, that was her verdict. The access chain wasn't just locked. It was sealed under a federal fail-safe encryption layer I'd triggered when I logged my credential pause. Every tunnel, every certificate, every handshake ran through that compliance vault. To unwind it, they'd need 3 agency approvals, a background clearance, and a Tier 4 authorization signature. You're not getting that before Friday, Carla said, deadpan. Melissa blinked like a deer seeing headlights for the first time. Can't we expedite it? Carla turned, unimpressed. It's federal, sweetheart, not DoorDash. Unless you've got Homeland Security on speed dial, you wait. That's when the panic calls started. First legal, then ops, then the CFO's office. By 10:47, Melissa was sweating through her blazer, her foundation melting like courage under heat lamps. She tried my personal cell twice, then my signal line, then somehow dug up my old home phone number that hadn't rung since Obama was still in office. Each went unanswered. I sat quietly in my kitchen, slicing a banana into my cereal, letting the calls stack like unpaid invoices. Because here's what people like Melissa never learn. We don't scream when we're angry. We go silent. And when the silence lands, it's already too late. Inside Norval, the walls were closing in. The CFO, Robert Pierce, a man who lived inside Excel and caffeine, finally entered the chaos. Someone explained to me, he said, voice low and lethal, how we just lost our federal relay for 3 hours. Melissa babbled something about optimization and efficiency. Robert cut her off mid-sentence. You fired the key holder, didn't you? She swallowed. We were told her responsibilities were documented. He turned to Carla. Can we restore access? Nope. She's the only one who can unlock it. Robert exhaled through his nose like a dragon suppressing fire. Then find her. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't legal. It was a private number I recognized, the CFO's office line. I let it buzz out. Then came the email. Subject: Urgent. Compliance Incident Resolution. Body: Ms. Carson, your immediate assistance is required regarding an ongoing federal relay disruption. Please contact us. I closed the email and walked out to my porch swing. The sky was clear, the kind of blue you only appreciate when everything else is burning. By 11:20 a.m., the penalties had crossed $300,000. The Federal Compliance Office had officially escalated the outage to a Priority 1 incident. They wanted logs, credentials, personnel lists, everything. Melissa was trembling by now, standing in the conference room while Robert and the CEO, her uncle, tried to keep their voices down and their panic hidden from the board. The CEO rubbed his temples. We can't just rehire her. It'll look like an admission of guilt. Robert's patience cracked. Then what's your plan? Watch another $100,000 disappear every hour? That was when someone said it. Call her in for a meeting, whatever it takes. By 12:58 p.m., An emergency Zoom invite hit my inbox. Subject: Credential Restoration Meeting. Urgent. I waited 30 minutes before accepting. When I joined, their faces looked like ghosts. Robert center frame, the CEO beside him, Melissa pale as printer paper. "Ellen," Robert started, trying for calm. "We need your help to restore the system." "I'm not an employee," I replied evenly. "Then let's fix that," he said. "What do you need?" I took a slow sip of tea and leaned forward, my voice steady. 3 things. First, my termination is voided and backdated. I was never out of role. Second, I get my original clearance, full veto power, 0 oversight. Third, Melissa steps away from operations. No system access, no decisions. The CEO blinked. "That's extreme." Robert didn't hesitate. "Done." Melissa's mouth dropped open. "Wait, what? You can't just—" "We just did," Robert said. "You cost us $400,000 in a federal audit. She's the only one who can fix it." I didn't smile. I just nodded. "Good. Once credentials are reinstated, I'll need root access, full deploy privileges, and no interference. Any attempt to help triggers an automatic rollback." "Understood," Robert said quietly. "Timestamp the reactivation at 8:59 a.m., I added. "It's not a panic hire. It's a clerical delay." Melissa looked like she'd swallowed a stapler. I ended the call without waiting for goodbyes. By 2:09 p.m., the reinstatement hit Norval's HR log like a quiet earthquake. Employee reinstatement, Carson, E., effective 08:59 a.m. today. The timestamp wasn't random. It was backdated exactly 5 minutes before my so-called termination. Optics matter. On paper, it looked like a delay, not a disaster. The system logs refreshed, and there it was in clean green text. Keyholder of record, E. Carson, credential chain status, active. I received the confirmation email without fanfare. No applause. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the fortress I'd built had finally reopened its gates. Only for me. At 2:17, a new message from the CFO. All access privileges restored. Proceed at will. So I did. I logged into the relay console from my home workstation, my fingers moving by instinct across decades of muscle memory. The system greeted me like an old friend who'd been waiting for permission to breathe again. Certificate rotations, handshake validations, endpoint integrity sweeps. Each line of code responded as if relieved I was back. The relay framework I'd built wasn't fragile. It was disciplined. It didn't fail when I left. It waited. By 3:34 p.m., the network hummed alive. Delta 9. Relay, stable. Throughput normal. Security handshake verified. The penalty clock froze at exactly $400,000. The system exhaled, the data flowing clean again. I watched the logs scroll in tidy rows of confirmation messages, like rainfall on glass. And somewhere across town, in Norval's boardroom, someone probably whispered, "She did it." A company-wide update landed at 4 o'clock sharp. Service fully restored. Federal liaison notified. Compliance incident resolved. We thank all involved for their professionalism under pressure. The phrasing made me laugh. Professionalism under pressure, as if that covered the chaos they'd caused. The final paragraph buried the truth in legal tone. The temporary interruption occurred during a brief lapse in active keyholder oversight. Translation: the one time they ignored me, the sky fell. I leaned back, the sun dipping low through the blinds, and allowed myself one small breath of satisfaction. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the quiet relief of competence recognized. even if no one dared to say it out loud. At 5:00 p.m. sharp, the board convened an emergency session labeled High Sensitivity. 23 faces tiled across the screen, each reflecting a different shade of corporate dread. Melissa joined, 2 minutes late, breathless and shiny, clutching a notebook she'd never use. She opened with brittle cheer. "I appreciate everyone's time." "Let's not sugarcoat this," Robert interrupted. "We're in damage control. The CEO tried to mediate. Let's approach this as a lessons learned opportunity." Robert turned to him. "Lesson number 1. Don't fire your key holder during an active contract." Then someone said, "Bring her in," and my tile appeared. I wasn't in an office. I was still on my porch, sunlight glinting off my tea mug, calm as the ocean before a storm. "Good evening," I said evenly. "Ellen," Robert began, "thank you for joining. We just need to understand what happened." "I already sent you my packet," I said. Time-stamped log, screenshots, messages. It speaks for itself. He hesitated. "Could you summarize for the board?" "Certainly." I shared my screen, a clean chronological document from 8:57 a.m. to 3:34 p.m. It contained Melissa's internal emails, Slack exchanges, her optimization campaign notes, and that infamous LinkedIn post about agility and leadership. Then I added one more image, her message at 9:38 a.m. "Do we really need to keep the key holder crap active? Can't we just reassign and move on?" The silence that followed could have powered the building. Finally, Marlene, the board's oldest member, who'd built Norval's original compliance division decades ago, unmuted. Her voice was low, deliberate. "She should have been shadowing you, Ellen, not firing you." Melissa flinched. "Wait, hold on. That wasn't malicious. I just wasn't briefed." The CTO leaned forward. "You never asked." "I didn't think I needed to," she snapped. "I was told to move fast, be bold, take initiative." Robert cut her off coldly. "Your initiative cost us $400,000 and 2 federal warnings. You didn't move fast. You moved blind." The CEO pinched the bridge of his nose. "Effective immediately," he said. "Melissa will step away from operations pending a full review." Her jaw dropped. "You're suspending me?" Nobody answered. Every camera stayed on, but every eye looked away. I didn't gloat. I simply said, "The relay is stable. Credentials are secure. No further intervention required, as long as no one touches anything." Then I clicked Leave Meeting. No smugness. Just silence. The kind that lingers long after the call ends. The next morning at 9:07 a.m., another meeting invite appeared in my inbox. Smaller, quieter, less desperate than yesterday's emergency circus. This one was labeled Compliance Follow-Up, Closed Session. Attendees, CEO, CFO, Legal, and me. No Melissa. Her name had been silently stripped from the internal compliance channels overnight, leaving a ghost of an email alias no one would ever click again. I joined the call exactly on time. Robert's face looked carved out of exhaustion, eyes sunken, tie loose, the caffeine sheen of a man who hadn't slept. The CEO appeared grayer, his optimism wrung dry. Legal was composed but visibly tense, a stack of printed documents spread across her desk like evidence in a trial. The silence before they spoke was thick enough to count as an apology. Robert began, voice measured. "Ellen, we need to finalize the compliance narrative for the federal audit. I want to make sure we're aligned on what actually happened." I nodded slowly. "Then let's start by correcting one assumption." I held up the printed incident log, neat and highlighted. "I didn't leave my dongle. I filed a formal credential pause at 9:04 a.m. That's a federal procedure." The CEO frowned. "What's a credential pause?" Legal answered before I could. It's a mandatory security measure. When a cleared keyholder's employment ends, their system credentials must be suspended immediately until the chain of custody is reauthorized. Failing to do so constitutes a breach of federal compliance. I placed the log down calmly. Exactly. Had I not filed the pause, I'd have been in violation of the Federal Data Integrity Act. That would have been sabotage. What I did was procedure. The room went dead silent. Robert leaned back, realization flickering behind his glasses. So the system didn't fail because you locked it. It failed because we didn't understand the protocol. Correct, I said, my tone as steady as the hum of a server rack. The relay protected itself from unauthorized access. The system didn't malfunction. It behaved exactly as it was designed to when the keyholder was terminated without succession clearance. Legal flipped through her folder and found the supporting evidence. The audit trail showing my credential pause request, the time-stamped confirmation from the Federal Management Console, and the automated government acknowledgement. She murmured almost to herself, all within compliance boundaries. She did everything by the book. The CEO exhaled slowly, eyes drifting to the window. So, we caused this ourselves. I didn't soften my tone. You did. And it wasn't the first time someone here treated compliance like background noise. I glanced briefly at Robert, then back to the CEO. You assumed legacy knowledge was replaceable. That's how companies implode, not through hackers or external threats, but through arrogance. Robert didn't argue. He looked genuinely chastened. We're lucky you followed procedure. You're lucky the system listened to me when the people didn't, I said, quieter now. That's the only reason you still have a federal contract. The CEO rubbed his eyes. If this audit becomes public, it'll look like negligence. It was negligence, I said simply, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Not if you learn from it. Legal leaned forward. What are you asking for, exactly? I let the question hang, watching them squirm a moment longer before answering. Nothing dramatic, just structural change, clearer documentation, a command chain that respects its own infrastructure, and no more family promotions overriding federal procedure. Nobody moved. Robert finally broke the silence. Done, he said quietly. Considerate policy. The CEO nodded faintly, the fight gone from his posture. Understood. I gathered my papers. No dramatics, no smile. Good. Then we're aligned. As I left the call, I could almost hear the hum of the server room in my memory. Calm, stable, loyal. Machines never doubted me. It was people who had to learn the hard way. At 3:08 p.m., there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, the CEO stood there, flanked by Robert and Marlene, the board's elder stateswoman. He held a folder, cream paper, embossed seal, no buzzwords, just 3 lines. Position, Interim Chief Operations Officer. Mandate, Compliance Reintegration and Federal Liaison. Authority, Full System Veto, Unrestricted Budget Access. He didn't make a speech. He just said quietly, "We'd like you to come back, on your terms." The hallway behind them was quiet, sterile, like even the air didn't want to interrupt what came next. I glanced at the folder in the CEO's hand, heavy cardstock, official seal pressed into the corner, the kind of formality usually reserved for promotions they announce with champagne and internal press releases. But there was no celebration in his eyes, just exhaustion and recognition. Robert looked like a man who'd finally understood the cost of ignoring the people who keep the lights on. Marlene, dignified as ever, gave a single nod, the faintest smile tugging at her lips like a teacher watching a student finally solve the equation. I didn't take the folder right away. What happened to Melissa? I asked evenly. Robert answered, "She's been reassigned." Reassigned, I repeated, the word tasting like corporate perfume. Sweet, but empty. He nodded. She's technically still employed, but far enough from operations that she might as well be auditing PowerPoint fonts. No system access, no budget control, no staff. HR's phrasing was advisory placement in non-critical initiatives, so they'd buried her politely. It wasn't cruelty, it was consequence. I finally reached for the folder, flipping it open. The first line read, Interim Chief Operations Officer, Compliance Integration. Below it, my name. The third line sealed it. Full veto authority, unrestricted systems command. No begging. No, we'll consider it. No temporary consultant. Just a quiet surrender in ink. You're serious? I asked. Robert nodded once. We're done mistaking flash for function. You built the backbone of this company. We'd like you to keep it standing. I studied them for a moment. The CEO, uncharacteristically humble. Robert, the pragmatic survivor. Marlene, still sharp behind her age. All right, I said finally. The CEO seemed almost relieved. You're not asking for more? Power doesn't have to shout, I replied. I just want to fix what nearly broke. They exhaled in unison, the sound of 3 reputations unclenching. By 4:00 p.m., my new badge was printed. Level 5, System Command, E. Carson. I ran my thumb along the edge, feeling the raised texture of authority I hadn't asked for but had earned the hard way. At 4:37, I walked back into the building for the first time since that morning. The glass doors recognized my credentials instantly. Access granted. Inside, the office was a different world. The chaos had burned itself out, replaced by an uneasy calm. People nodded as I passed, the kind of nods that mix respect with fear. Nate looked up from his workstation, eyes wide, relief painted across his face like a confession. You're back, he whispered. System stable? I asked. He nodded fast. Everything's green. We didn't touch a thing. Good, I said. Let's keep it that way. When I reached the server room, the hum greeted me like a heartbeat I'd missed. The air was cool and dry, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly over rows of machinery that had been waiting, patient and loyal. My old chair was still there, the coffee ring on the armrest untouched. For the first time in weeks, the place felt right. I stood before the security scanner, badge poised. The small green light blinked, waiting. I tapped it gently. Access granted. The door clicked open with a sound that felt almost human, a quiet acknowledgement between 2 survivors. Inside, I paused for a moment, taking in the rows of servers like soldiers standing at attention. The system hadn't forgotten me. It had obeyed the code I'd written, protected the walls I'd built, and waited for the only person it trusted to return. I placed the folder on the workstation, exhaled, and began typing again. Command windows opened, systems reports flickered, and the network purred under my fingertips. It wasn't triumph. It was restoration. The kind of peace that comes after proving a point so thoroughly, you never need to raise your voice again. Somewhere above, in the boardroom where words like optimization had replaced wisdom, they were probably toasting to new leadership alignment. But down here, in the hum and glow of the real world, I knew the truth. Machines don't care about politics. They care about precision. And I was the only one who ever treated them that way. By 6:12 p.m., the building was nearly empty. The executives had scattered, desperate to prove to each other that order had been restored. But real order wasn't restored by meetings or memos. It happened here, in the cold hum of servers that never lied. I sat at my workstation, screens flickering like candlelight in a chapel of logic. One by one, I began auditing the logs, tracing every skipped authorization, every timestamp of negligence. Melissa's optimization initiative had left a digital footprint the size of an asteroid crater. She'd reassigned roles without verifying clearance, signed off on changes she couldn't explain, and left dozens of alerts unresolved. Her chaos had lived quietly beneath my discipline until the system itself rebelled. The server room door opened behind me. It was Robert. No entourage, no small talk. He just stood there, watching the code scroll across my screen. "You really built all this from scratch?" he asked quietly. "Not from scratch," I said, not looking up. "From disaster." He let out a low whistle, half admiration, half regret. "You know, when Melissa convinced the board to cut compliance overhead, she told us the system was over-engineered, that we didn't need a full-time keyholder anymore." I typed another command. That's the problem with people who think stability is automatic. They never notice who's keeping the chaos out. Robert nodded. "Well, we notice now." "No," I said, still typing. "You noticed when it cost you $400,000. You learned when you realized it could have cost you the company." He didn't argue. He just stood there in silence while the last of the system checks completed, the green bars filling across the screen like quiet absolution. When the final line read, "System status stable," I leaned back and turned toward him. "You know," I said, "Melissa wasn't wrong about one thing." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The system was over-engineered, because I built it expecting exactly this kind of failure. Not technical, human." Robert smiled faintly. "I'll make sure that's in your file." "Do that," I said. "Just put it under prevented catastrophe." He chuckled, but his eyes were tired. "You'll have carte blanche moving forward. I don't want this kind of risk ever again." "Then start by listening," I replied. "To the people who don't talk in buzzwords, the ones who speak in documentation, not slogans." He gave a slow nod. "Consider it done." When he left, I sat in the silence for another minute, letting the hum of the servers wash over me. Each machine was a living reminder that systems, unlike people, never pretended to understand. They simply followed truth. By 7 p.m., I sent the final audit summary to the board. A simple report, concise, time-stamped, impossible to argue with. Then I packed my things, just the essentials, my notepad, my badge, and the small chrome dongle Melissa had once mistaken for a trinket. I slipped it into my pocket and walked through the darkened office, the echo of my steps the only sound left in the corridors. Near the exit, I passed the glass-walled innovation lounge she'd installed, a sterile space filled with beanbags, fake plants, and words like synergy and velocity stenciled on the walls. It looked abandoned, like an expensive joke no one was laughing at anymore. I paused, turned off the light, and kept walking. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean. The city lights stretched beyond the parking lot, glittering like circuitry. I unlocked my car and sat for a moment, watching the reflection of the building in the windshield. The same company that had erased me 12 hours ago now depended on me completely. Funny how fast redundant can turn into irreplaceable. My phone buzzed. A message from Robert. "Federal audit passed preliminary review. Compliance restored. Thank you." No emoji, no exclamation points. Just quiet gratitude from a man who'd finally seen the cost of ignorance. I typed back a single line. "Let's build it right this time." Then I put the phone down, started the car, and drove home through the glow of streetlights, thinking not about revenge, but about precision. Revenge is noisy. Precision is silent. And silence, I'd learned, is the only language power truly respects. The following week, Norval felt different. Quieter. Cleaner. The air in the hallways didn't hum with panic anymore. It carried something rarer. Awareness. Compliance memos that used to die unread in inboxes were suddenly gospel. Even the marketing team started quoting procedure numbers they didn't understand. That's how fear works in corporate ecosystems. It doesn't scream. It lingers, whispering caution into every click. From my new office, a corner space overlooking the downtown skyline, I could see the reflection of the building's mirrored glass catching the afternoon sun. The same place that once dismissed me as process overhead now ran on protocols I'd written years ago, the ones they'd ignored until it nearly bankrupted them. My name wasn't on the front door, but it was in every server log, every encrypted signature, every automatic backup. The code remembered me, even if people pretended they'd never doubted me. At 10:43 a.m., I got a meeting request from the CEO. Short notice, closed session. I walked in expecting another apology disguised as a debrief. Instead, it was just him and Robert, both standing as I entered. No theatrics, no waiting game. The CEO gestured toward a chair. "Ellen?" he started, voice slower, careful. "We wanted to thank you." Quietly. "Quietly suits me," I said. Robert smiled faintly. "The audit closed clean this morning. The Inspector General's report noted the disruption, but specifically credited the integrity of your system design for preventing data loss. They even cited it as a model of automated containment." I nodded. "Good. That means I did my job." "It also means," the CEO added, "we still have a contract and our reputation." He paused. "You didn't have to come back. You could have let us burn." I tilted my head. "I didn't come back for you. I came back for the system. It deserved better caretakers." He absorbed that without protest. That was progress. Robert slid a document across the table. Permanent appointment, full COO, no interim. I glanced at it, but didn't sign. "I'll think about it," I said. "Power only works when it's not taken for granted. Let's make sure no one forgets that again." They didn't argue. They knew better. That afternoon, I walked past the cubicles, past Nate, who smiled nervously like he was still afraid to touch the keyboard without permission, past the empty desk where Melissa once sat, her nameplate gone, replaced by a potted plant someone hadn't watered. I stopped for a moment, then kept walking toward the server room. The doors opened with that same soft click. Inside, the hum wrapped around me like an old song. Machines don't forgive, but they remember loyalty. I placed my badge on the reader, watching the green light blink once. Steady, unwavering. The relay dashboards glowed, every system in sync, every checksum aligned. Perfect. On the main console, I typed one final command. Not to lock, not to destroy, but to log the moment. System integrity audit. Complete. Operator of record, E. Carson. A simple line of text, time-stamped in the permanent ledger. Proof that silence can be louder than revenge. I closed the lid of my laptop and stood there for a while, letting the rhythm of the servers fill the room. Revenge stories always end with explosions, public humiliation, someone begging for mercy. But the real endings, the ones that last, sound like this. Clean code, quiet power, no witnesses. As I left the building, sunlight reflected off the chrome badge in my hand. I thought about Melissa, somewhere out there, probably polishing her resume and rewriting history in bullet points that skipped the words $400,000 penalty. Maybe she'd even learned something. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter, because the system had listened when no one else did. It had waited, protected, obeyed. And when it finally called my name, I answered. Not out of anger, out of precision. The automatic doors slid open behind me, sealing the cool, humming air inside. The city stretched ahead, alive and oblivious. I walked toward it with the calm of someone who didn't need to win anymore, because the silence had already done it for her. And somewhere, deep in Norval's network, a single green light blinked steady and true. Access. Authorized. Keyholder. E. Carson.